Welcome back, everyone, to a new episode of Emerging Brands Podcast with Kelly Bennett. Today, I have a very special guest, a founder who did an epic pivot launching her brand in 2020. When we had a chat before booking the podcast, I was so taken by her story. And I'm thrilled to have Isabelle Steichen, founder of Lupii, on the podcast today.
Hey,
So thank you,
Kelly.
Isabelle. How are
Thank you for
you?
having me. I'm good. I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. I know I just teased it a little bit, but I would love to hear the story behind your brand. Give me a little bit of how you started, why you started, and then we'll dive into that epic pivot in 2020.
Yeah, totally. So we launched Lupii in January of 2020. And the short version of the backstory is I moved to the States about 10 years ago, and at the time transitioned to a plant-based diet and became really obsessed with the plant-based food space because I was a consumer of it myself. And I identified a few things that I was struggling with. One was a lot of the options that I had access to were highly processed and overly engineered with tons of ingredients in them that I really didn't want to consume. And then the second piece was that there was very little diversity in sources of protein. It was all soy and pea and more soy, and just no real alternative options. And I knew, there's more to the plant universe than soy and pea. And growing up in Luxembourg, which is where I'm from originally, I had a lot of friends from Italy and Portugal because we have really large communities from those countries. And so I always knew of Lupini beans because they've been eating those in those cultures for a very long time. And as I started ideating and thinking about, how to solve this problem, how to offer less processed, more high quality, sustainable plant-based protein to US consumers, I kind of was brought back to my roots and started researching Lupini beans, developed a real passion and obsession for them. Back in 2017 is really when I started looking at them more closely and started talking to some growers in Europe and entrepreneurs that were using the ingredient abroad. And one thing led to the next. I just uncovered all these nutritional benefits, the fact that they have the most protein among all beans. They are considered a complete protein, delivering all 9 essential amino acids. They're also the only low-carb bean on the market, which again is really unique because consumers are looking to eat more plant-based, but it's really hard to eat high plant-based diets or high protein plant-based diets and not overdo it on the carbs. And then Lupini beans are also packed with gut healthy fiber, which is so essential for our overall health. And in addition to that, they have all these environmental benefits, being that they're regenerative and a rotation crop. So the more I was learning about this ingredient, the more I was like, this needs to be on US consumers' plates. And that's kind of what led me to quit my last startup job in 2018, which usually I like to have plans and I'm very, kind of want to structure and know what's happening next. But at the time I just was like, no, this is really calling me. I want to spend actual time and exploring if I can build a business around this concept of introducing Lupini beans to the US consumer, and left my job and then very quickly was able to find a really amazing first investor in the business that got me set up to launch the business. And I brought on a business partner at the time. And so we started building Lupii together and launched our first product line, the protein bars, in January of 2020, 2 months before the pandemic. So, excellent timing.
I remember you telling me that, and I was really struck. I was like, whoa. What a wild time to launch a protein bar for travel and on the go, working out, and then the whole world literally shuts down. So a few things that you touched upon before we dive into the next chapter of the brand is how you landed that first investor.
Mm-hmm.
Any insight there of how you were able to do that? Any insight on best practices or lessons learned? I would love to hear that because I'm sure so many people listening are having that on their list of goals that they're working on.
Totally. And I would say my goal was not to find an investor. My goal was to find a way to finance this business. And I had come from tech startups mostly. I'd spent my career working in software companies. And I knew software companies are a bit cheaper and faster to get off the ground because you don't have to create a physical product. You're not investing in inventory. You're not necessarily investing in the same amount of brand. And obviously you don't have packaging design and all those things. So it was really clear to me that if I wanted to have a shot at this, I needed to have the right funding in place. And I did not have the independent wealth to invest, besides obviously my time and energy in the business. And so wanted to go down that route of finding an investor from the start. What kind of happened a bit organically was that at the time when I left my last startup job, kind of deciding I needed to take some time off and focus on this, I reconnected with this investor, but in a slightly different capacity. They actually reached out to me like a month after I left my job and said, hey, we're really interested in a plant-based food space. We would love to have you come on as a consultant and do some market research and do some ideation around different business opportunities. And so I came on and I consulted for them for 2 months, and which was great because, you know, I was learning more about the space and seeing the numbers behind the opportunity, but I already had the concept for Lupii in the back of my mind. And 2 months in, I basically pitched them this concept and they were incredibly excited about the opportunity. I had met that team actually years before. So that was a relationship that I started probably back in 2015 or 16, where I was connected to them through a friend and I had done some consulting work for them already a few years back. So they knew me, and they knew also that I was very passionate in the plant-based food space and that I had been plant-based for a long time. So I'd say this relationship kind of happened in some ways organically. And then there was a little bit of kismet, you know, the fact that I had left my job and had this idea and they were looking to invest in something in that space. I'd say, you know, it's oftentimes when, you know, you plan so much and then things don't happen that way, and the other way around, it works too. You know, I didn't leave my job thinking, oh, I'm going to find an investor in the next 4 months. It was more like, I'm going to have some space to think about this and start actually executing on it. And then I'll figure out the rest of it later. So it kind of happened faster than I expected, but between the time that we started talking and they invested, it was about 9 months or so. And so they knew me before, and then they started getting to know me even more. You know, I was in their office almost every day for a period of time, and then they wanted me to bring in a partner, a business partner. That was a bit of a condition for them to put in funding. So I went out and spent 3 months interviewing people to bring on board. So they got to know me, and I think ultimately they are a truly early stage investor. You know, a lot of people say they are early stage, but then they don't invest until you're like 5 million in revenue, which
Right.
is not that much, but it is a lot when you're at the early stages where you're getting something off the ground. They invest at concept stage, and that's very hard to find, I think. And they truly invest in the founder or the founding team. And I think they were just big believers and are continuing to be believers and supporters of the business and the brand and of myself. And so I got lucky in those ways as well, that, you know, I just found a real match with them.
It really does sound kismet of how that all came together. And also the fact that you had a relationship that you've been cultivating, I'm sure pouring into, keeping in touch, right? And then it also sounds like you gave yourself permission to have the space to really come up and flush out your concept, where again, a lot of people can overthink that stage also. And practically speaking, too, maybe don't even see that as a possibility. So it also sounds like you gave yourself permission to take that space and pause. And then you were able to take on that consulting opportunity, where then that led to your first investor.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when I left my job, my plan was I will find some type of consulting work to pay my bills, and then I will still have more time to work on this than when I was working a 60-hour startup job. So
Right.
I wanted to say, let's find 20, 25 hours a week that I can do consulting work. And make an income. And in parallel, I'm opening up a lot of time to really start working on this. So that was the plan originally. And it kind of worked out in some ways because I did start doing some consulting for them. And then that all turned into a longer term relationship. I will say there's a lot of luxury associated to that, right? I do have a very supportive partner who's always been a big believer and who always encouraged me and who encouraged me to leave my job and to do part-time consulting, even though that was obviously had a financial impact. And so I have that luxury that I had that type of support, and not just financial, but also emotional, someone who says, okay, yeah, go for it. It's a great move. And I believe in you.
Absolutely. That is huge. I hear so many, especially women founders who don't necessarily have that emotional support in particular. And it really takes a long time to do that inner work for them to even recognize themselves as a founder or a small business owner or an entrepreneur. So the fact that you have that support also is incredible. I love how you really leveraged all the things in your life to align for this growth. My next question for you is, getting to 2020, starting off launching as a protein bar, the whole world shuts down. You finally got the emotional support, the financial backing, the business partner. You go to market, and then everything flips on its head. What happens next?
Yeah, so I have so much more perspective on it now, looking back at it. But at the time, there was no doubt that we would continue trying to figure this out. And I think one thing that I kind of was raised with professionally was figuring things out, right? I've only worked for early stage startups. I was oftentimes employee number 5 or 6. And so that's at the stage where you're still working most of the time in an apartment. You don't really have an office, and like you have to be incredibly scrappy and problem solving oriented. So I kind of don't know anything else. I never worked in a company where I had a big budget for anything. And I never worked in a company where things went according to plan, because we were building things that were new. And so we didn't really know what the plan was. Actually, we were building that plan while we were building the business. And so I think in hindsight, that was kind of no doubt that we would just try to figure it out. I don't think we even had a conversation about maybe shutting down the business, because at the time we had been in market for 2 months, we had taken some money, but like some of my friends ended up pushing their launches or taking a break from the business until things recovered. That was not really an option on the table. My business partner and I, we decided that we would continue. And so we had very little options on the table. We wanted to go after retail, and we actually had Whole Foods reach out to us in February of 2020, which is so bittersweet. They sent us, I think it was a DM on Instagram, I can't remember, or an email, and they had found us in this pop-up activation in LA in February. And they wanted to talk about bringing us into stores. And then the world shut down a month later, and all these opportunities just disappeared in a heartbeat. And so what we did was really moving operations to be remote. So at the time, we're still hand fulfilling product. We temporarily moved it into our own apartments. We had an intern who was doing some of the fulfillment maybe in March and April of 2020. And then we moved it to a 3PL. And then we decided, okay, we need to continue growing and selling. So the only option was to sell online, D2C, and start selling on Amazon, which is what we did. And in many ways, it was a blessing because we got so much direct consumer feedback, and consumers aren't shy, especially online, to tell you if they don't like something. And so
that's true.
I got a bunch of feedback on the recipe and the taste, and the product had one main flaw. It was drying out incredibly quickly because we had these transparent wrappers that looked cool and kind of tried to resonate with the concept of we're transparent, we're showing you what's inside. The problem is, from a functionality perspective, the barrier protection wasn't strong enough. So they were drying out really quickly. They were really dry. So we changed the packaging. We made some adjustments to the recipe. And we spent 2 years selling online. And then within those 2 years, what I started thinking about really early was how can we start diversifying? The pandemic was such a great example of, okay, if you put all of your eggs in one basket, like both from a product, but also from a retail strategy or channel strategy perspective, you just really high risk. Now, if you diversify too much, that's a big risk too, because you're spreading
Right.
resources. But we always wanted to build a platform for the bean that plays across different aisles of the grocery store. So we were never just going to be a bar company. We always had ideas for other product categories. And I'd say the pandemic accelerated that. And so we started looking at additional categories in 2021 and explored 3 specific ones and ended up landing on pasta for various reasons. Also used a lot of our existing online consumers as an innovation lab. They gave us a lot of feedback on the product ideas. They tested the early prototypes. They gave us packaging feedback. So we really built the second product range with a ton of consumer feedback. And then we launched the pasta line just over a year ago now.
Incredible. And I love how you leveraged that early adopter group of consumers who already sold on the concept. They were willing to give feedback and then have them test the new product that you were going to market with. That's so clever. And I think that so many small business owners, especially in the early years, could overlook the people who've already purchased because they're so focused on getting more customers and more customers. But what you're saying also is really talking in more depth with the customers you already have. Even if it's a small amount of people, you could still get a really robust insight on where to take your business and where to take the brand, and having them also promote the product for you. So I really admire that you did that, because it's such a great way to market and it's often overlooked.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was also one of the learnings I got from my previous startup jobs, where we had really close relationships with our early adopters. Like the last company I worked for was a software company in the children's education space. And those providers, the first like 20 people that started using the software, I mean, I knew all of them by name. I had their phone number. I would grab coffee with them. When we were building out new features for the software, I'd go and show it to them, get feedback. And I think exactly what you're saying, we're not a big company. We don't have a huge pool that we can do, research with. We can't do these like thousands of people studies, but we can talk to existing customers who are already fans of the brand and who have opinions, obviously, and who have reasons why they like it. And they can help us guide, the next moves and strategic decisions of the business for sure.
How did you get to pasta?
A few reasons. I would say starting off just high level, this bean is providing on more protein and way less carbs than any other bean. So looking at categories where today there's a lack of high protein, low carb options. That was one of the guardrails, is really where can we add these functional benefits in a really differentiated way. So there's a lot of options, right? I mean, pasta is one of them, baked goods, crackers, things like that, where today you're maybe missing some of that functionality. So that was one of the pieces. We then did a lot of research on the market size and who the winners are and the losers, and some assumptions around why are those brands winning, and then also looking. We talked to retailers, to existing accounts and new accounts, and kind of ran some of these ideas by them and listened to what they had to say. And then also did some research with our existing consumer base. So that was a big piece of it. And then we started doing R&D to assess feasibility, right? Once we had kind of these pieces figured out, we actually landed on 2 different product ideas and started going down some feasibility routes. So can I find a co-packer for this? What's going to be the cost of my product? Can I achieve the nutritional claims that I'm looking for? What's the shelf life? What are all these pieces? Really understanding the operational implications and the financial implications. And pasta came out as a winner. And what we really believe in is that category is the innovation in that category has really just started scratching the surface, right? We have Bonza,
Absolutely.
who's built the alternative category over the last 8 years and have done an amazing job at that. And they are leading with chickpeas. And then you look at all of the additional alternative pastas, and 90% of them are also chickpea or lentil based. So they are also doing the exact same thing on the nutritional side. We're coming in and we're delivering 40% less net carbs than chickpea or lentil pasta and 60% less than actual pasta. We have more protein than alternative pasta and, more than 3 times the protein than regular pasta. And then we have 4 times the fiber than regular pasta and almost more than twice than chickpea pasta. So we're doing something really incremental in that category from a nutritional perspective. And then also, obviously, there's a whole environmental story with lupini beans that we're telling. And again, a lot of legumes are regenerative, but lupini beans are definitely have that aspect. And then they also are very resource efficient to grow. They don't need a lot of water. So they have that whole environmental piece to them as well.
Incredible. So what is the brand strategy now? Looking at the coming to a close of 2023, the year ahead, the years ahead, I would love to hear of just where you're taking the brand.
Yeah, totally. So the hypothesis with pasta was really diversifying the business, but also finding the real hero of the brand. And
Right.
we've proven that this year because we launched a pasta about 12 months ago, and it's now representing the vast majority of our revenue. We've had way more ease getting it on retail shelves, and we're seeing healthy velocities out of the gate. We have very limited marketing resources, really, really scrappy. So it's exciting to see that starting off, we're doing fine. And if we start investing more, we can definitely see there's a lot more opportunity. And so we've proven that this year, and we've opened a lot of additional retail accounts with the pasta and actually rolling out in a bunch more this fall. And then we have a larger account coming online in January. And so I'd say the next 12 to 18 months are really going to be focused on continuing to drive velocities with the pasta line in existing accounts, scaling it to a bit larger distribution, which is what we have in the horizon, Q1 of next year. And then driving the business to real sustainable profitability. We have a healthy margin profile already, but we're a startup. We obviously invested a lot in the brand up front, and
Right.
we're looking to get the business to a place where it's profitable within the next 12 to 18 months. So that is the focus. And that's all about being incredibly disciplined and rigorous and honest with yourself, I think. And it's very hard because we were part of that generation of startups, and we were maybe at the end of that, but that were all about top line revenue growth and how can we get to these crazy sales numbers really quickly. And what I came to realize is, food and beverage is very different than tech. And a lot of people know that in theory, but then when they invest, they still kind of invest with that lens. It takes time to grow a crop, and it takes time to build a brand and build awareness. It takes many, many touch points with consumers. We're also adding an additional challenge that is the opportunity too, which is introducing a novel ingredient that requires education.
Right.
So we need to exist. We need to be around. We need to start getting into consumers' brains and minds. And that just requires some time. And so in order to spend that time well, really being focused on how can I drive, where I am right now, like more velocities in existing accounts, go deeper with the pasta. We have 3 SKUs, which is a lot if you think about it in terms of building a large business, and we can innovate within those SKUs. We don't have to go into other categories. We can add other shapes without needing to go outside of where we are right now. So that's what I've been really focused on, and what I will continue to focus on over the next few months.
Thank you for sharing that, because what you just shared is such solid, practical advice that someone could start implementing, and not even just implementing, but shifting their perspective around. What you're speaking to is very much what I'm now coming to, because I come from the startup, small business, scrappy, like you were saying, and if people are investing, they want to see revenue, they want to see it quickly, and definitely getting burned out from that. So what you're sharing now is such solid advice of taking a bit more of a pause, it sounds like, and going again, more depth versus trying to reach everyone at the same time, and having that diligence and discipline to see the vision through.
Yeah, and being mindful, I think when we're so early and we are trying to get to these sales numbers, I think, or I'm going to talk for myself, I can get distracted with shiny objects on the marketing side and, oh, this brand is doing this, or, ads were all the rage in 2020 and 2021 when everyone was in front of computers all day long.
Right.
Problem is, I think none of these things alone are actually sustainable, and they will all at some point be obsolete. So again, diversifying your marketing strategy and really doing small tests and figuring out what's actually working for my brand, because demos and sampling might work for one brand, might not work for another brand. Building out a referral program might work for one brand, might not work for another brand. And I
Right.
am a believer that there are ways to test that on a small scale before starting to invest. And so that means you're not going to see crazy sales overnight, but you're starting to really understand, where's my consumer, what resonates with them, how can I use, or what is my approach in terms of educating consumers, who can I tap into for that? And that's the hardest part. And I think throwing money at stuff, maybe it worked for a hot second, especially during the pandemic when people were just shopping in a very different ways and their attention was way more focused. But I think really it's kind of the scrappy long road that is usually the road that works, and it's not the most comfortable one, but I think that's kind of what works historically.
Thank you so much. I am personally going to re-listen to this episode often whenever I need a pep talk, and to have, again, that reframing of perspective of looking more at the long game and leveraging what you already have in order to grow. And I just really, truly appreciate you saying that, because I think this needs to be more of the conversation, especially in the early years of building a brand. So thank you so much for sharing your story. This was incredibly impactful. And how can people, most important question, how can people shop your pasta? How can they shop your brand? Give us the inside scoop.
Totally. So we have a website, GetLupii, GetLupii.com, and you can go on to Store Locator to see where we are in terms of physical retail. We're in about 1,000 doors right now across pasta and bars across the Northeast, Pacific Northwest, SoCal, and some others in between. So there's a chance that you can find us in stores in real life, or you can order us on our website directly or on Amazon. Or if you are a Thrive Market customer, we are also selling our pasta and bars on Thrive Market. So that's definitely an option as well.
Incredible. Thank you again. This was such an incredible, incredible interview, and I appreciate you so much. Everyone, go get pasta and enjoy. Thank you so much. See you soon.
Thank you, Kelly.
Bye.